Okay, so for today's project, we are going to need a couple pliers. These round nose ones are nice, but these needle nose ones might also be helpful. We are going to need some earring hooks, some beads, some thick wire, we're using 20 gauge for that, and some thinner wire, we're using 28 gauge for that. All right, so the first thing we are going to do here is we're going to make the little loop to attach it to our earring hook. So I'm going to start at the smallest part of my round nose pliers, and I'm just going to turn it like this until it makes this little hook here, like that. Then I'm going to kind of measure my beads with my round nose pliers to see roughly what size my beads are in comparison to the pliers. So mine are probably a little bit smaller than the largest part of these pliers. So I'll say around that area. If it's a little bit bigger than your bead, that's perfectly fine. It'll still work out. But I'm really just gonna go for the number of beads that I want. I'm just gonna kind of weave back and forth. I'm gonna make kind of these little like loops here. Just alternating what direction I go. And it can be kind of helpful to leave a little bit at the top here. I probably didn't leave enough. You probably want to leave a little bit more space at the top there so you can kind of create this part that sticks up. That'll make it look a little bit better. If you kind of curve that part up before you start curving these. I'm gonna do a little trick here. I'm gonna hold it here and grab with another pliers to kind of straighten this out. And really the nice thing about wire is you can always move it. So if something isn't looking the way that you want it to, you can push it back in a different direction. So really all this is moving it around until you like the way that it is looking. All right, now that I got this part looking the way that I want it to, you see I kind of have this part going straight up before it curves around here. I am going to start making my curves where the beads will fall into. So I'm gonna go about halfway around there. So you'll make kind of this S shape like this, and then you can kind of move it up on your pliers. Again, doing whatever shaping you think is necessary to make it look the way you want it to. But you can kind of just like rotate it around on these pliers, and you're just gonna make one of these little waves for each of your beads that you're planning to put in here. So you'll keep going down until you have the number that you want. All right, now that I have this kind of zigzag shape, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. I'm gonna put 4 beads in there. So now I'm gonna bend this, and you can finish this off in a number of ways, but this is just the way that I like to do it. But I'm gonna bend this back in the other direction, but I'm gonna start a little bit higher up on my pliers here because I wanna make just a smaller loop around here. So I'm gonna do this, and now I've kind of gotten it once around here. I'm gonna tuck that little part in there, but first I'm gonna take clippers, and you might have to, depending on what clippers you're using, these are just little ones on the inside of my needle nose pliers here, so you might have to bend it out to get to it, but I'm just gonna trim off the end here. and then we'll kind of tuck that little piece in. So we were wrapping it around before. I'm gonna flatten it back down. And I'm just gonna keep working my way around here. Flip upside down this way so that I can kind of get a better hold on it. And just keep spinning this into a circle to make that kind of spiral look. All right, and so once you kind of have this shaped the way that you want to, like I said, you can finish it off in many ways. Like on this end, I kind of decided I didn't really like how that spacing looked, so I decided to kind of make this little squiggly pattern instead. Feel free to be creative, just do whatever you think is feeling good, makes it look the way that you want it to. Then I'm just coming in with my needle nose pliers that have this flat part, and I'm just kind of squishing this down so that it lays flatter, because as you're doing all of this bending, you may not have the wire perfectly flat the whole time. So that kind of just helps flatten it out again. And now we kind of have our general structure of what our earring is going to look like. So we're gonna start putting our beads on. And to do that, we will need our thinner wire. I'm gonna start at the top up here, and I'm gonna kind of loop it through this first part and just wrap this wire. You can do it with your fingers or the pliers, whatever feels best to you. But I'm just gonna take this wire and wrap it around this first little segment here. I like to leave a little bit of a tail. It'll help you kind of wrap it around there a little bit better. We'll trim this off in just a second once we feel good about how it's wrapped around there, but that'll just kind of give you something to grab onto on both sides. So it'll help out a little bit. And you really should be good with just one wrap, but if you want to give it a couple, you can do that. As we move down here, you may want to opt to do kind of a cross wrap, which I'll show you. And that might help keep your beads a little bit straighter. So if you look at it here, the wire is ending on this side. It's this, our continuing wire that is going to keep coming down here is on this left side, and then it wraps around here and our tail ends up on this side. All right, and so once we have that wrapped the way that we want it to, it kind of just has this little loop around here. We can trim that tail off so that it looks nice and clean all the way around. And then we will add our first bead. And we'll just kind of thread that onto our wire here. Slide it all the way down. And you'll want it to sit kind of in the middle of your next part. So hopefully you made your size of your loops big enough, but it should just pop into there. You might have to bend the wire a little bit as you do it. Perfectly fine, whatever you gotta do to make it work. Then we're gonna do the same thing here. Just gonna wrap it around like this. And now, one thing you can do to kind of try and help your beads sit a little more straight. Some people like the zigzag look, I kind of do. Your beads, if you were to just put your next bead on here, your wire's kind of more to this side, so your beads are gonna end up looking a little bit like, creating more of like a zigzag pattern, if that makes sense. And if you want it to be a little bit straighter, it can help to take this wire and kind of cross it back over what we did before. So we're gonna do that by kind of threading it through this part between our bead and our wire frame, and really just honestly pulling it tight through there, and then we're gonna push it back over this way, kind of pulling it into place a little bit more, and that'll create more of like a little cross here, and that'll just bring our wire back more to a central position here. All right, now that we have this first bead secured, we can go ahead and grab another one and thread it on. And we're just gonna repeat this step. So now that that's lined up there, we're gonna kind of wrap it around on this outside part first, creating that first little loop. And then we can take our wire and thread it between the bead and the loop part of the frame. Kind of pull that tight. You can work with it with your pliers a little bit. Sometimes it gets a little wonky and you kind of have to push it through there a little more. Sometimes you can grip it better with your pliers, really whatever you feel like is working best. And you can kind of, if you want that loop to be a little closer together, you can kind of squish it. That'll help it look a little more cohesive. And again, just aligning your beads however you want to, molding your wire as you go, really. Just adjusting it as you add your elements is going to be the most important part, just to keep it looking the way that you want it to, because things bend as you're working with them and things will look different as you add different elements to it. But now that we have that bead on there, we are just going to do the same thing with our last bead here. Add this little guy on once again, pushing it into its spot and wrapping it around this outside part, and then looping back through on this underside between the bead and the wire frame. Again, pulling and using our pliers to help us if we need to. All right, once you have it wrapped around like that, you can come in and just trim as close to the base as you can, but you aren't gonna be able to get really perfectly flush with it. So you'll have this little tail here that you're gonna wanna kind of just like round out and tuck in. All right, and once you have that end kind of just wrapped around there, just so that it's not sticking out anymore, again, feel free to make any movements that you want to, bend your wire in any other way that you want to. I'm feeling pretty satisfied with mine at this point, so it's time to attach our earring. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna grab one side of the hook with one pliers and the other side with another pliers. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna keep one steady, and with the other one, you're gonna push it down. So you're just gonna kind of create, you don't wanna do any sort of pulling apart motion like this. That's gonna make your metal a lot weaker. So you really just want to take one side and twist apart, kind of like that. So that'll create a nice opening for you like this. And then you can kind of just loop your earring through there. And then we're gonna do the same thing to close it, but in reverse. So I'm gonna grab one side here, one side here, and just twist that back to close it. And then we have an earring.